stop long enough to hear, look beneath the surface, listen to, and with your heart. I find in my counseling that when I get a call because there's been a blowout with a couple and they need a referee or whatever it might be, I find in my counseling often that when we begin talking that neither one of them, either both of them don't really know what the problem is, or whatever the problem that started the argument is not what ended the argument, what caused the blowout. There's other issues that are there, and we often carry those issues in, whether it's past hurts or whether it's the insecurity or feeling unrespected or whatever else it might be. And so we need to really listen to one another. We need to look underneath what the problem that brought it out is and try to really look and listen with our hearts in going through that. So we talked about how we need to audit your thoughts and be able to just share what's really going on. So often we don't tell the other person what we're mad about. We're just mad. We expect them to read our mind, or we expect them to know what they did, and or we say, when they ask us what's wrong, we say something like nothing when it is something, or we talk about this issue when the real issue is over here. And so and the Bible teaches whether it's you have ought against them or they have ought against you, you cannot use excuse, well, she's got a problem, she can come talk to me, or he's got a problem, he can come talk to me. It doesn't matter whose problem it is. One of you needs to step up to the plate and say, we need to resolve this. And usually and mostly it comes down to responsibility of the husband, because you're the leader of the home. And you can't wait on your wife. You've got to take that leadership responsibility in doing that. And so now we're in letter B there under Roman number 2, and we want to talk about you need to pass your praise. You need to pass your praise. Go over to Proverbs chapter 31. Proverbs chapter 31, and look at verse number 28. Proverbs chapter 31 and verse number 28. It says, her children arise up and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praiseth her. Often the problem we have is the only time we speak up is when there's a problem, and we're not vocal when everything is going good. We don't take time to thank our spouse for the daily things they do for it, whether thanking your wife for making the meal or thanking your husband for bringing home the paycheck or whatever it is. We don't thank each other and appreciate the things that they do on a daily basis. And often we don't even thank them for when they go above and beyond the call of duty and do something special. But we're real quick to tell them when there's something wrong. And we need to build an underlying foundation of praise. And when you have an underlying foundation of praise, when you're daily praising your spouse and thanking them for who they are and what they've done, and then when a problem comes up, it's going to be a lot easier to deal with, because you're not starting down here, you're starting up here. You're starting on a higher level. And it's also good when you are dealing with a problem is to begin with a praise and then talk about the problem. And so it might start out with, you're you're so helpful to me in so many ways, and I really appreciate your helpfulness. And then to go into what they didn't help you on and talk about that. And so it's always good to pass that praise. And it says specifically here, her husband also, and he praiseth her. And I find most husbands are not good at doing this. And this is why God had to specifically call out the husband rather than call out the wife, in that we need to praise our wives. And that's an important part of the process that we need to get the habit of doing. Make it your habit every day to say something you're thankful for, to praise them, whether it's verbally, whether it's maybe through a text or email. Even you're at work and you just think, I really appreciate it about my wife. Take a moment to text her or email or tell that, or call her on the phone. But make it a habit of praising one another. Both husbands and wives need to do this more often. And then go over to 1 Peter chapter 3. 1 Peter chapter 3 and look at verses 8 through 12. 1 Peter chapter 3 and beginning verse 8 says, finally be all of one mind, having compassion on one another, love as brethren, be pitiful, be courteous, not rendering evil for evil or railing for railing, but contrariwise blessing, knowing that you are there to call, that you should inherit a blessing. For he that will love life and see good days, let him refrain his tongue from evil, and his lips to speak no guile. Let him eschew evil, spit it out, and do good. Let him seek peace and ensue it, to pursue after it, to work towards that goal. For the eyes of the Lord are over the righteous, and his ears are open to their prayers, but the face of the Lord is against them to do evil. One of the good habits to get into is when your spouse brings up something negative, our immediate response is, first of all, to raise our shields, become defensive, and then to load our ammunition. Well, let me tell you what you do, and to immediately respond back in kind. I may not do this, but you don't do that. And we want to return fire. And this is exactly what it's saying not to do. Don't render evil for evil, but to render a blessing. And so when your spouse comes to you with a problem, before you deal with that problem, tell them, thank you for bringing this problem to me. And by the way, I want to tell you how much I appreciate you. And tell them how they've been a blessing to you, or something positive about them. And that will so diffuse the situation. It tells us there in verse number 10, for he that will love life and see good days. You want to love life and see good days? Refrain your tongue from evil. Don't give back evil for evil. Don't respond. We react instead of acting. And so we've got to be more generous with the praise. And it's not going to take away from the negative. In fact, when you're more generous with the praise, what they're going to do is they're going to drop their shields and become less defensive, and they're going to withdraw their weapons, or at least not point them at you directly. They're going to kind of put them down to the ground and take the aim off of you. You're no longer the target. And it just changes the whole situation. Now, what we're afraid of is that, well, I'm not going to get my shots in there. You don't need to get your shots in there. You need to take it and to pass that praise. And so it's very, very important to do that. So we want to pass the praise. Number one, not criticism. Not criticism. Go to Proverbs chapter 14. Proverbs chapter 14 and verse number 1. Proverbs chapter 14 and verse number 1. Every wise woman buildeth her house, but the foolish plucketh it down with her hands. You cannot build something by tearing it down. Now, there are times when you have to tear down in order to build. You've got a house, you buy a property, and the house is all broken and termite eaten. You might have to tear the house down in order to build a new home there. But at some point, you've got to start building. And that means you can't build your marriage relationship by tearing down your spouse. What you need to do is you need to build them up. You need to make them stronger. And criticism is a negative attitude. And we got to be careful of being critical. We need to deal with problems, but not in a critical manner. Somebody once said this, I think it was Bob Jones Sr. said, griping not tolerated, constructive criticism is welcome. So make sure if you have something critical to say, this is not right, we need to change this or whatever, do it in a constructive way. How can I build you up and make you better so you can deal with this? Because when I tear my wife down, she's not strong enough. I'm tearing her down. She's not going to be strong enough to deal with whatever the criticism is, whatever the problem is. So try to get rid of that critical spirit. And especially if you're one of those by personality or by habit or whatever it might be, if you're a critical person, there are some personalities that just tend to be, they see the negative in everything, and they're always talking about, there's always something to say that's wrong, and they have a critical spirit. And you want to avoid having that kind of spirit. And you also want to be careful when you do have a criticism, add the word constructive. How can I present this in a way that it could be constructive and build my partner up rather than tear them down? How can we together build up this area of our marriage? And then secondly, not nagging. Not nagging. Turn over to Proverbs chapter 19. Somebody once said that nagging is the act of constantly reminding someone of something they already know. I think it's a good definition. It's the act of constantly reminding somebody something they already know. Be careful not to nag. And the ones who probably get nagged the most are otters, because we tend to put everything off. And especially if that otter is married to a beaver, that could be a very situation where there's a lot of nagging going on. And there's a difference. Now, I need my wife to remind me of things, because I am a forgetter. I preached a whole message on that. And I sincerely, it's taken my wife probably the 39 years we've been married to finally figure this out. I don't purposely forget things. I just forget. She's the kind of person that remembers everything. I mean, she talks about Her dad's the same way. He can tell you what he paid for his car in 1945. He remembers everything, and my wife is that way too. And she cannot understand why. How can you not remember that? And it's just not part of my brain. My brain does not work that way. And so I forget things all the time, and she has taken it for many years. She took it very personally, like I was doing this just to be mean to her, like I was doing this on purpose against her. And not only is it because I'm a forgetter, but I'm also an otter, so I'm a procrastinator. I used to have a little plaque on my wall when I was growing up. Seriously, I had a plaque and it said in there, why procrastinate when you can put it off till tomorrow? And that was my life motto. And I am a world-class procrastinator. Everything is tomorrow, later. And that's why God had me marry a beaver, because I needed somebody that's going to help me not forget, and I need someone that's going to help me not to procrastinate. But there's a difference between nagging and reminding. And most of that is the Spirit is done with, and it's also, is this something they've probably forgotten? Is this something that they just need reminded? You said you do this later, or is this something that, that I'm just being pushy on? And there's a big difference with that. In Proverbs chapter 19 and verse number 13, it says, a foolish son is a calamity to the father, and the contentions of a wife are a continual dripping. See, when it's just constant reminding over and over again. Let me give you an example in my own life. My wife is really into vitamins. She's a big vitamin person, and she's now with my cold. She's trying to give me garlic and vitamin C. I mean, I don't have to eat food anymore. My vitamins will fill me up, And she's got this whole handful. And I'm not good at that. When she was gone, she said, "Don't forget to take your vitamins." And I put with her right on the counter, right where I could see them every day, and they were right where she left them when she got back. Not one of them had been touched. And it wasn't a purposeful thing. I wasn't like, "Hey, she's gone. I don't have to take vitamins anymore." It just, I would walk right by it. I could look at it and it wouldn't register in my mind, take your vitamins. It's just not part of who I am. And so I know that when she reminds me every day, take your vitamins, I know that's because she loves me. And she tells me, I want you to take vitamins, like she's got 2 of them for cholesterol. I'm on the borderline for cholesterol. And she always checks what the doctor says after I go. And she somehow makes her appointment with the doctor the week after I go. And she talks about me more than she talks about her needs when she's at the doctor. And so she found out I'm borderline cholesterol, so she's got these 2 cholesterol pills that I have to take every day. And I say, well, why don't you take this? Because I don't want you to die. And she wants me around. It's because she loves me. But you know what? It sometimes can be, there's a difference. She can nag me about taking vitamins, or she can remind me. And there's a difference between the two. And if you don't know this difference, you better start learning. There is a difference between nagging and reminding. And I need her to remind me. And I know she's doing it because I love her. And I have to accept that. But I don't want her to be a continual dripping on that either. Look over at Proverbs chapter 21 and verse number 9. It is better to dwell in the corner of a housetop than with a brawling woman in a wide house. That's such a clear statement. Look at verse number 10. The soul of the wicked desireth evil. His neighbor finds no favor in his eyes. He just wants to get away from it. I just want to get away from this. I'm tired of this. And that's the way some husbands and some wives. It's not just wives that can be naggers. Husbands can be the same thing. And we have to be real careful of that. Whenever the Bible repeats itself, it means this is important. So God's trying to give us a message. And just like men tend not to praise enough, women tend to be the naggers more than men by the nature of how God created you as a woman. We talked about that. We talked about our differences. And so this tends to be more of a woman's problem than a man's problem, but men can be guilty of this as well. And you've got to learn what the difference is between nagging and reminding. And how you do it, the way you say it, when you say it, how often you say it, all those come into play in learning that process. And you're going to need to pray and say, Lord, help me to change this. And in some cases, it's not worth it. You know what? One of the times I told my wife, listen, I may not want to live longer if you're going to nag me about this. And that was a message she needed to understand. I don't want to be nagged about it. You know, I understand the reminder, and we need to work on it. And then we had to work on a compromise too, because that whole handful of pills, you know, I'm not a big believer in as much. I realize that vitamins are good, but you know, all the time you're reading articles, this vitamin and that vitamin, the next week it's another vitamin, and they're all miracle cures. They'll cure everything from toenail fungus to cancer, you know. And I'm not that big a believer in them, and I'm an immediate kind of guy. If I can take the vitamin and I feel better today, I'll take it. But most vitamins don't work that way, do they? And so we had to come to a compromise. You can't give me all these vitamins you want me to take. I'm not going to do it. So you got to determine what are the most important ones you feel I really need to have, and then we'll work that out. I don't want to be taking vitamins all the time. And so we had to work out a balance of the two in doing that. And so you got to work at this and not be a nagger. Number 3 is not harsh. Not harsh. Go over to Proverbs chapter 15. Proverbs chapter 15, and look at verses 1 and 2. A soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. The tongue of the wise uses knowledge aright, but the mouth of fools poureth out foolishness. Look at Proverbs chapter 25 and verse number 15. By long forbearing is a prince persuaded, and a soft tongue breaketh the bone. We need to learn a soft answer, not harsh. Sticks and stones may hurt your bones, but words go deeper, and they do. Words really go deeper. So be careful of the choice of the words. Be careful of the tone of your voice. Be careful of the body language. So often our argument is not over what the problem is, it's over how the problem was presented. The words that were used, the tone, and the body language involved there. Go over to James chapter 3. James chapter 3. And beginning with verse number 1. It says, My brethren, be not many masters, knowing that we shall receive the greater condemnation. For many things we offend all. If any man offend not in word, the same is perfect man, and also able to bridle the whole body. Behold, we put bits in the horse's mouth, that they may obey us, and we turn about the whole body. Behold also the ships, which though they be so great, are driven by fierce winds, yet are they turned about with a very small helm, whitherso the governor listeth. Even so the tongue is a little member, and boasteth great things. Behold how great a matter a little fire kindleth. And the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. So is the tongue among our members, that is defiled the whole body, and setteth on fire the course of nature, and is set on fire of hell. For every kind of beast and birds and of serpents and of the things in the sea is tamed, and hath been tamed of mankind. But the tongue can no man tame. It is an unruly evil, full of deadly poison. Therefore bless we God, even the Father, and therefore curse we men, which are made after the similitude of God. Out of the same mouth proceedeth blessing and cursing. My brethren, these things ought not to be so. Doth the fountain send forth the same place sweet water and bitter? Can the fig tree, my brethren, bear olive berries, either of vine figs? So can no fountain both yield salt water and fresh. This little thing right here does more damage. Most of our arguments and most of our problems are not the problem. It's the words that we use and the way that we say it. And you've got to work on this area. Work at toning down your language. Get rid of as we talked about earlier, certain key words that really set things off. Words like you never or you always, those are fighting words. And there's certain harsh terms, and there's terms that set your spouse specifically off. And we need to get rid of those words and a soft answer. So not only the words that we use, but the way that we say it. And sometime, if you want to do a little experiment, have a whispering argument and see how long it lasts. It just doesn't work, because it's the tone that really sets the whole situation. So how do we rebuild our marriage? Go over to Ephesians chapter 4. We're going to kind of park there a little bit. We'll go back and forth some other verses. But if you have a little ribbon in your Bible, pull it out and put it into Ephesians chapter 4. And this is the part of the lesson where we talk about how to argue. Now, most couples, when you say, I'm going to teach a lesson on how to argue, most couples say, well, you're too late. We've already learned how. We're real good at this. But the problem is we're not good at arguing. When you argue, you attack the problem. When you fight, you attack each other. And most couples are very good at fighting, but they're very bad at arguing. And so it's learning how do we attack the problem without attacking the person. In a lot of cases, it's like dealing with cancer. one of the hardest things to deal with cancer is getting the cancer out without taking good with it. It's in surgery. You're trying to cut out that cancer and leave all of the good around it. And you've got to get all the cancer out, because if you don't, it's going to grow back. And with chemotherapy and radiation, what do? They're trying to kill the cancer, but in the process, it's almost like they're trying to kill you. And this is what happens in a lot of relationships. Now, sometimes there is no choice. Sometimes the situation is embedded so deep, it's going to take some cutting, and even cutting in some good to get to it. And sometimes there's going to have to be some drastic things, because it's eating away at the whole relationship. But we want to learn how to attack the problem rather than attack each other. And so this is the key. And Ephesians chapter 4 kind of goes into this. And we're going to be looking at verses 17 through 32 in this section here. It says, "This I say, therefore, and testify in the Lord, that ye henceforth walk not as other Gentiles walk, in the vanity of their minds, having their understanding darkened, being alienated from the life of God through the ignorance that is in them, because of the blindness of their heart, who being past feeling have given themselves over in lasciviousness." Now, that's one of those big words in the Bible. You should always understand these words. Lasciviousness basically means anything goes. Just do whatever you want to do. If it feels good doing it, it's all about me. "To work all uncleanness with greediness, but we have not so learned Christ. If so be that you have heard of him and have been taught by him, as the truth is in Jesus, that you put off concerning the former conversation the old man which is corrupt according to deceitful lusts, and be renewed in the spirit of your mind, and that you put on the new man." There's a 3-step process. Put off, learn the new, and put it on. So there's a 3-step process there. "That you put on the new man, which after God is created in righteousness and true holiness. Wherefore, putting away lying, speak every man truth with his neighbor, for we are members one of another. Be angry and sin not. Let not the sun go down upon your wrath. Neither give place to the devil. Let him the stole steal no more, but rather let him labor, working with his hands the thing which is good, that he may have to give to him that needeth. Let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth, but that which is good for the use of edifying, that it may minister grace unto the hearers. And grieve not the Holy Spirit of God, whereby you are sealed unto the day of redemption. Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and evil speaking be put away from you, all malice, and be kind one to another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, even as God for Christ's sake has forgiven you." Okay, so it's a long passage, but let's break it down a little bit. And we're going to kind of start after it talks about put off the old, put in the new, and then put on the new. That's the 3-step process we've got to go through here. So I've got to stop doing it the old way and start doing it the new way, but there's a learning process in between. So the first thing, when you are having a discussion, whatever you want to call it, an argument, a fight, or whatever you want to call it, the first thing is you've got to be honest. Look at verse number 25. "Wherefore, putting away lying, speak every man truth with his neighbor, for we are members one of another." And I find in my counseling and also in my own relationship, we are not honest with each other. We're not honest for a number of reasons. Sometimes we're not honest because we don't want to, we think that if I tell them the truth, it's going to hurt them. Or we're not honest because if I tell them the truth, it's going to hurt me. Or we're not honest because we don't even really know what the truth is. There's a lot of reasons why we're not honest. And so many times when there's a problem, we say there's nothing wrong, or we talk about this when it's really this over here. And so we've got to start by being honest with one another. Number one is open, honest communication is the key to any relationship. Open, honest communication. Can your spouse be honest with you right now? Can your spouse be honest with you right now? For example, if we did something where we said, okay, I want every one of you to turn to your spouse and ask them on a scale of 1 to 10 how you're doing as a husband or as a wife. Now, not here, but I want you to do it when you go home. Now, some of you, if your spouse asked you that question, you would lie through your teeth. And some of you, the reason you would is because you would be afraid of their reaction. If your husband said on a scale of 1 to 10, how am I doing? And you said to him, well, you're about a 3. He'd go, a 3? What do you mean a 3? And he'd be proving you right, but he would not want your honesty. And so some of you, your spouse cannot be honest with you because of the reaction they're going to get, either of anger or maybe of tears or the silent treatment or whatever else. They will not be honest with you because they can't, they're afraid. They're afraid of the reaction. Okay? And so that's a lot of times what the reason why. Other reasons we're honest is because we don't want to hurt that person. If I tell them the truth, it's going to hurt them. And it's not we're afraid of the reaction, but I just don't want to hurt them. A lot of times retrievers are that way, and they won't tell the truth. And so you think, okay, everything's good when it's not good. That's the way our marriage was the first 5 years. My wife is a classic retriever. I'm a classic lion. And when I say, how are things going? She said, oh, it's great. I love being married to you. But inside, she was dying, because I was being the lion to the retriever, and I was just dominating her, but she would never tell me that. And took me a long time to figure that out, because she was lying to me. I thought everything was okay, and I wasn't going to change because everything's good. And how can I change when I don't know everything is good? So there's got to be some open, honest communication. And you've got to provide that freedom for your spouse to do that with you, to be open and honest and talk about where the real problem is without being judged, without getting angry or being hurt or whatever else it might be. Look at Ephesians chapter 4, verse 15. It says, but speaking the truth in love may grow up in him in all things, which is the head, even Christ. Not brutal honesty. It's speaking the truth in love. It is cushioning it with that praise. It is saying it because I know you can be better than this. I know what you have in you. It is saying it because I want to have a better relationship with you. As long as this is happening, I'm going to hold back from you. I don't want to do that. It's speaking the truth in love. It's saying in a way that as much as I can, I'm not going to hurt you, but it may hurt. But I don't want to hurt you. It's like when you go to the doctor or when you go to the dentist. He says, you ever heard a dentist advertise he's painless? They're liars. In fact, I went to one that advertised he was painless. I bit him and he screamed. He felt pain. And I was immune to Novocaine growing up, and so it hurt me pretty bad. And I want the truth. This is going to hurt, but I've got to do it. Otherwise, it's going to hurt a whole lot more. It's going to get worse. And so I don't want them to sugarcoat it. I do want them to sugarcoat a little bit, but I want them to understand. I want them to tell me the truth. And as a husband and wife, you need to have open, honest communication. Look at Matthew chapter 5, and look at verse number 37. Matthew chapter 5 and verse number 37. But let your communication be yea, yea, nay, nay, for whatsoever is more than these cometh of evil. We talked about last week the woman's dictionary that fine doesn't mean fine. And ladies, that's really not fair, because we believe you. And when you say everything's fine, or what's wrong, honey? Nothing. And men are guilty of this also. It's not fair, because we're taking you at your word. And so you've got to let your yea be yea and your nay be nay. You don't need to elaborate and say it in a painful, hurtful way. You don't need to go on forever about how everything's wrong. You need to focus in and deal with things in love. But we got to have open, honest communication. Folks, this one thing alone, if you can get a hold of this and put it in practice, is worth everything else I'm teaching. It really is. Because this is where most of our problems come from. We're not honest, we're not transparent, we're not open, and we got to have open, honest communication. There are basically 3 levels of communication. The first one is the answer level. That's when your spouse asks you something, you say something like, yeah, no. Or some men, It's grunts, it's one word. It's a couple of sentences at the most. That is not open, honest communication. There's got to be an open communication, so there needs to be room for discussion. Now, if you're a lion, you don't say a lot. If you're a retriever, you're afraid to say it. If you're an otter, you lose your train of thought, and you've got to work at that. But you've got to have something beyond the answer level. And there's got to be some more depth to when you discuss things and talk about things and go through that. The second level is the facts level. Just the facts, nothing more. Just going to give you the basic, here's the facts, and that's where we stop at. And that's better than the answer level. It at least gives me a little bit more information, a little bit more detail. But we need to get to the feelings level. Now, that's a bad word to a lot of men, but we need to deal with the feelings. Now, that's hard for most men, and many women don't talk about their feelings anymore because they've been hurt too much. Their feelings have been burnt so much. It's like having a sunburn. You don't want anybody to touch you because you hurt. And they've gotten burned by you as their husband so many times, or even a husband has gotten burnt by his wife. He finally opened up and talked about his feelings, and that's been used against him for the rest of his life. Or he finally opens up and talks about his feelings, and now she's mad at him, or she's upset, or she gives a silent treatment or whatever else. When you do that, you close that door. If you want your spouse to be honest with you, if you want them to be open with you, and if you want them to begin talking about more than just yeah or just the facts, you've got to give them the opportunity. Now again, as we talked about earlier, there's going to be give and take. If you're the woman with 25,000 words and the man's only got 15,000 words, you need to stop at 15,000 words. Because if you want to keep talking about the feelings and keep going on and on and on about the feelings, he's going to tune you out. He's going to tune you out. So you've got to understand that. And you've got to understand the retriever, for them to express their honest feelings from the inside, oh, that's hard. Because they're afraid. And for the lion to talk about feelings, that's hard because he just doesn't deal with feelings. What are feelings? And if he does, he's afraid he's going to flip that switch and he's going to lose control. And that's something a lion doesn't like to do. For an otter to talk about feelings, that's just, let's go to something else easier. That's too difficult. There's too much. Each one's got a different aspect of it, but we got to have that open, honest communication. Number 2 is build on a foundation of trust and confidence. The only way to have open, honest communication is through trust and confidence. They've got to trust you. I'm going to give you my heart, and I'm going to trust you with that. They've got to have confidence that you're not going to abuse it or misuse what you've given them. They've got to have confidence you're not going to go talking to your mom about it, or go talking to your best friend about it, or even go talking to the pastor about it. They're going to have confidence, without their permission. They've got to have confidence that you're not going to, disrespect them because of it. Look at Proverbs chapter 31. Proverbs chapter 31 and verse number 11. If your spouse is not willing to be open and honest with you, probably they do not trust you. Probably they do not have confidence in giving you that kind of information, because it'll be misused. It's what it comes down to. Now, don't get mad at them for that, because what you have not done is given them that feeling of confidence. You've not given them that trust in you. In Proverbs chapter 31, verse number 11, it says, the heart of her husband does safely trust in her, so that she shall have no need of spoil. Now, whenever the Bible uses a term that is sex specific, it's telling you that this is probably more of a problem for that sex. If it says the husband, it's probably more of a problem for man. If it says he, it's probably more of a problem for man. He is the generic term we use for all mankind, but especially in situations like this, when it says he, that's probably a bigger man's problem. When he uses her, it's probably a bigger woman's problem. So this is a bigger woman's problem. Ladies, I hear this all the time. My husband won't open up with me. He won't talk about his feelings, and there's a reason why. He doesn't trust you. He doesn't. He doesn't trust you with that information. He doesn't trust you to not misuse it. And you can't get mad, and you don't get trust. So I say, you can trust me. That doesn't get you trust. Trust is earned. Confidence is earned. And so you've got to prove yourself to them and build that trust and build that confidence little by little. It's not going to happen overnight. And men, it is a problem for a lot of us men. In a different aspect, but we still have a problem. A lot of times our wives open up to us. You know what they get upset about? Is we listen and then we do nothing with it. It's like we forget all about it. I opened up to you and you didn't even pay attention. See if I open up to you again. And they don't. And by the way, this carries over. A lot of couples who are having sexual problems, it's a trust problem. Because there's nothing you have to trust somebody more with than being naked in front of them. They don't trust you in what you might say about their body. They don't trust you in how, it may not have anything to do with sex. They don't trust you in this area, and how can they be physically open to you when they don't trust you in these other areas as well? And so it's very, very important to deal with this trust. What it comes down to, fellows, is letter A, she needs security. Again, most of the time when I get the call for the big blow up and the wife is all upset and saying, I'm done or whatever, usually what it is there's a lack of security. She's afraid that this marriage is not secure and somehow or another there's something wrong in it and she's going to leave. Now, what she's doing makes it less secure because she's pushing him out the door, so to speak, with her anger, but there's a lack of security. If you want to deal with a problem, your wife needs to be secure. To say to your wife, honey, I don't ever want to leave you. I want to live the rest of my life with you. And there's a problem we need to deal with because I want to enjoy the rest of I'm sticking with you for the rest of our life, and I'd rather enjoy it than not. So can we deal with a problem here? But when you lay that foundation to the problem, then they're more willing to deal with the problem. And for most women, if they get angry and you're saying, why did they get so angry? It's probably because they're not feeling secure. Either they think you're looking at other women or they think you're thinking about divorce. And you may never think that, but they're going to put that into your mind. They're going to project their insecurity onto you. And so you need to understand that. Now, for men, if they lose their temper in an argument and won't be open and honest with you, it's because they feel disrespected. He needs respect. I don't want to talk about this problem because I know it's my problem, but if we deal with it, you're not going to respect me if you know why I have a problem with this. And he feels like if I open up my feelings to you and I talk about what I'm struggling with, that you're going to lose respect for me. And so, ladies, the most important thing you can do for your husband when you're trying to deal with a problem is make sure you know that, yes, this is a problem and it's not good and we need to deal with it, but you know what? I still respect you. And when you can project that to your husband and convince him of that, he will be much more open to dealing with a problem. But if he feels like, if I tell you how I'm really thinking or feeling or tell you what I'm struggling with, you will not respect me as much, he will not tell you. So trust and confidence, so important. If you want honest, open communication, become a person your spouse can trust and that they're confident in. They're confident there's nothing they can do that's going to cause you to leave them. There's nothing you can do to cause you to disrespect them. Number 3, we do need to be careful not too honest. Honesty is not always the best policy in the sense of this. Look at 1 Peter chapter 4, look at verse number 8. 1 Peter chapter 4 and verse number 8. And above all things, have fervent charity among yourselves, for charity shall cover the multitude of sins. And there's times that honesty is not the best policy. Let me give you just an example. It's not a good idea to be honest with your wife. Say, you know, I saw this girl over here. She looks prettier than you. That may be honesty, but it's not going to be good for your marriage. It's not the best policy, okay? You see, you've got to be careful of this. And you want to be honest, but there are times where you don't need to be honest. Now, what are those times? Number A, what will it accomplish if I tell? Now, this is both past and present. Maybe there's some things in your past you think, well, maybe I should tell my husband and wife about this. And there's times you need to, especially if there's a goal you're going to accomplish. Let's say, for example, before you were married, you were unfaithful. You had a relationship with somebody else, physical relationship, and your spouse didn't know it. And now you're having all kinds of sexual problems that come from that guilt you have from that previous relationship. You need to be honest with your spouse because they're feeling like you're not wanting to have sex with them because there's something wrong with them, when the problem is not them. The problem is your guilt that you haven't dealt with. So there's a purpose to telling them about this past relationship and saying, I never told you about this, and this wasn't fair to you, and it's affecting me now, and we need to talk about this. You don't need to go into all the details. Now, again, honesty doesn't mean I have to tell them every last detail, how many times I had sex with that person, what kind of positions we had, and all the rest of that. That's not helpful. It's not accomplishing anything. When I deal with a couple where there's adultery involved, the person that's been cheated against, they want to know all the details, and it doesn't help a thing. If you're going to forgive, the more you know, the more you have to forgive and forget. So I think in most cases, it's better not to know too much of the details. There's a certain amount that has to be shared in order to move forward, because you can't move forward without dealing with that and then forgiving and forgetting it. So what, if I tell them this, what is it going to accomplish? I remember one guy, one time, he went to his wife, and I wish he'd talked to me first before he did it. He went to her and told her he didn't like a physical feature about her, and it wasn't even something she could change. It was something that she was born with. And he didn't like it. And this was something that she was before they got married, and he married her anyway. And now she's telling, I don't like this, and there's nothing she can do to change it. So the rest of her life, she's going to think he doesn't like this about me. What does it accomplish? You know, the problem was not hers, the problem was his. And he needed to get over it. So when I'm being honest with you, if I'm going to tell you something, what is it going to accomplish telling you? If it's not going to accomplish anything, then you don't need to tell it. Give you another example. When I was in college, I had a guy come up to me one time. He said to me this. Comes up to me, he says, I want to apologize to you for all the bad thoughts I've had about you. Then he walked away. You know what I spent the rest of the day thinking? What was he thinking about me? He had never acted badly towards me. You know what accomplished in that? He felt better, I felt worse. It didn't accomplish anything for the relationship between him and I. In fact, it made it worse, because now I'm wondering, what's he thinking about me now? You know, it didn't accomplish anything. So me being honest with you, me telling you this, whether it's a problem or whether it's something about me or whatever, is it accomplishing something? Number two, will it edify, build up, or will it tear down? Telling you this, will it build us up or will it tear us down? Now again, sometimes you have to tear down in order to build up. But I don't want to just tear down for the sake of tearing down. You know, put a hole in the wall, that's not going to do any good. Now I got to patch the hole. So what is it going to accomplish in the way of edifying, which means to build up? Number C, am I just transferring my guilt? That's what that guy did. He transferred his guilt to me. He walked away feeling better because I confessed. Now, if he had acted badly towards me, he needed to apologize. If he had said things about me to other people, he needed to apologize for that. But there was none of that. It was just thoughts in his own head. That was his problem, not my problem. And he was just transferring guilt. You see this a lot in divorces. A husband commits adultery, leaves his wife into the woman, and all of a sudden he's telling all these bad things she's doing now. You know why he's doing that? Because he knows he's guilty, but he's blaming her. He's transferring the guilt to her, like somehow she's wrong, and he's not the guilty one when he's the jerk. So is it just transferring my guilt? Is it meant to help or to hurt? Yeah, I'll tell her this, and yeah, that'll really hurt her. You know, a lot of times our honesty is really a weapon we use to hurt the other person. E, is it the best time, place, or way to talk about this? Sometimes honesty is good, but not right now. Not right now. This is not the time. This is not the place. This is not the way to say it. You know, number F, have I prayed about it? Before you're going to share something that's going to be painful or hurtful, pray about it. Pray about it a lot before you tell your spouse. So choose that honesty. But if you're going to deal with your problems, if you're going to communicate, open, honest communication based upon trust and confidence, but what is the purpose of my honesty? Is it going to help or hurt? Number B is be current. Go back to Ephesians chapter 4. Excuse me. Ephesians 4, 26 and 27. Be ye angry and sin not. Let not the sun go down upon your wrath, and you give place to the devil. So be current. Don't let the sun go down upon your wrath. One couple, they said, you know, we've been married for 20 years and we've never gone to bed angry with each other. Now, some nights we've never gone to bed, but we've never gone to bed angry with each other. That's not what it means. And when it says, let not the sun go down upon your wrath, it doesn't mean that you have to get it settled before the sun sets in the evening. Basically, it's a 24-hour period. Somewhere within this 24-hour, we're going to resolve this issue, or we're going to begin the process. We can't resolve everything in 24 hours. Sometimes it's a process, but we got to begin the process. One of the problems for a lot of couples is they never, you know, we'll deal with this later, and later never comes, especially if you're an otter. Another problem is that we just don't want to deal with it, and we just stay mad at each other. That doesn't help either. So we've got to stay current. Look at 1 Corinthians chapter 13. 1 Corinthians 13 is what often is called the love chapter, it gives 16 characteristics of love. And in verse number 5, it says, love doth not behave itself unseemly, seeketh not her own, is not easily provoked, thinketh no evil. Now later on, we're going to go through this and look at each of those phrases and what they mean. But I want you to look at the last one, thinketh no evil. Now that doesn't mean you just think bad things about people. The word thinketh is an accounting term. And it means not to put it on account. What a lot of us do is we have in our mind, in our heart, we have this credit card, this account for our spouse. And every time they do something that's wrong, we put it to their account, okay? Ding, ding, ding. And we add it to their account. And so we keep adding these things up instead of dealing with them. And if you've taken Dave Ramsey's course, you don't want to use credit. You want to pay for it now. So instead of dealing with that problem now, we put it on their account. And what happens is that account keeps building and building and building. You ever seen somebody go to the store? Maybe this happened to you. You go there and you put your card in the machine. And you got on the counter, you got maybe $5 or $10 worth of stuff. And you put the little card in the machine. And the machine says rejected. Now, is it rejecting saying you can't afford $5 worth of stuff? Is that what's rejecting? Why is it rejecting that card? Because there's $5,000 worth on that card and you're over your limit. And so they're not going to let you have that item because you've already got $5,000 worth there. And you know what happens in a lot of our arguments? It's because you're over the limit. We're not arguing over what just happened. You ever had an argument and you afterwards just say, why did we argue over that? Such a little thing. Why do we argue over that? It's because it was over the limit. Your account was full, and now you're going to pay. You can't go any further. You pay, and we're making them pay for the whole account rather than that $5 worth of items. And here's the other thing. Most of us, when we argue, we don't pay the debt. We pay the interest. You get your credit card bill. If you have a credit card, you get the bill. It's going to have on there, this is how much you have charged. This is the total bill you owe. And then it's got, what's the other figure on there? The minimum payment. And if you pay the minimum payment, what is the majority of that minimum payment going to be? Interest rate. And next month, you're going to owe the same amount, plus anything else added on there. And that's the way most of our arguments are. We have a fight. We pay the interest. And now, okay, we're okay now. But next time, we got more to argue over because now we've added to that, and the payment is bigger and bigger and bigger until we get bankrupt. We can't pay it anymore. And so that's why you have to be current. Don't let things build up. You've got one of two choices. You either go and say, hey, there's a debt here that needs to be resolved. There's something you've done that's hurt me, and you owe me to work this out. I'm not saying those terms, but I'm just saying we got to resolve this, or I'm going to forgive it. We were traveling the mainland. We were a support to come here to Wyatt. We were going from church to church. We were on the road all the time. And we had a home where our mail went to, and they would mail it to the churches ahead of us. But the problem was, with the postal system, it didn't always get to that church before we got there, and it would come after we left. And then it would be sent on and on. A lot of it we found out later, a lot of our mail got lost, including a debt we owed that never caught up with us, and we'd kind of forgotten about it. It wasn't a big debt, but we'd forgotten about it. And we never paid it. Years later, we went to the bank. We were getting ready to get a loan on our house, and went to the bank, and they said, we got to do a credit check. And they did a credit check, and here was this debt. And it had not been paid. But when we went to take care of it, they said, well, we just wrote it off. And we never had to pay it. Now, I was willing to pay it, but they just said, you can't. It's just amazing. You know, it was worse for their system to pay. It was such a small number, and it would have been worse for their system to pay. It would have cost them more. It says, we already wrote it off. You can't pay this. And sometimes that's what you've got to do, is say, you know what? This isn't worth holding against my wife, or this isn't worth holding against my husband. I'm just going to let it go. But the problem is we don't let it go. We hold it, because then when the next thing comes, now I've got two things. And now I've got three things. And we argue, we bring all that out. We may not actually say it, but it's there. You follow what I'm saying? So you've got to get rid of that credit account. You've got to deal with these things as they happen and keep your accounts current. If you're following Dave Ramsey Financial Peace, you know you got to pay as you go. And the same thing is true in your marriage. You got to pay as you go. You got to deal with things as they come up. Don't let them build up. Be current in dealing with them and going through that. Okay, I'm going to give you the letter A and B real quick because I want you to think about this, and we're going to come back to it next week. Here's what happens. There's two ways you're going to respond to hurts. Letter A, you get hurt. Your spouse does something to hurt you. You get angry. Anger leads to resentment. I'm mad at you, and now I resent how you treated me. I don't deserve to be treated this way, which leads to bitterness, which leads to attacking others. See, some of us, we hold that hurt inside of us, it builds up, and then all of a sudden we attack the other person, either verbally or physically. We get these hurts, we build them up, and then I'm going to let you have it, either verbally, emotionally, or physically. That's one way we respond. Second way we respond is we get hurt, it leads to anger. Anger leads to self-pity. Instead of resentment, I don't deserve to be treated this way. No wife should have to be treated this way. This isn't fair to me. It's self-pity, which leads to depression. I don't have, my life is so terrible. It leads to depression, which leads to attacking who? Myself. You attack yourself rather than attack your partner. And we attack ourselves emotionally, sometimes even physically. That's where cutting comes from. That's where some of these other things that people do themselves. Well, how can they do themselves? Because they've got to attack, and they can't attack out because of their personality or whatever reason, so they attack in. Which are you? And we don't want to build it up. If you look at Ephesians chapter 4, we're going to get to this next week. In verse 31, it says, let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and evil speaking be put away from you, all malice, and be kind one to another. Whenever you see a list in the Bible, you want to see what the progression is. A list almost always means progression. This leads to this, which leads to that, leads to that. Or there's just showing different facets of it, like in 1 Corinthians 13. Whenever you read a list, look at that. So let me ask you a question. Just be honest here. How many of you here know what the word clamor means? Maybe half a dozen hands up. When you don't know what a word in the Bible means, take a black marker and just blot it out. Because that's all the good it is to you. Find out what the word means. So what does it mean, clamor? What does malice mean? How is malice different than anger or wrath? How is wrath different? How does wrath lead to anger? We want to see the progression and understand the definition. So that's one of the things we're going to look at next week in going through that. And then we'll finish this lesson off probably next week in doing that. And then I'm going to be gone for 3 weeks, 3 Wednesdays. One of those is our prayer, praise, and pie service. And there'll be 2 other Wednesdays. I'm asking some men in the church to teach the class. And they're going to share with you 3 things. What I wish I would have known. Man, I tell you, I've been married 39 years, and there's some things I've learned this year that I said, man, if I'd known that 39 years ago, I'd have been a happier husband, and my wife would have been a happier wife. I wish I'd known this a lot sooner. What I wish I'd known, what I wish I would have done, there's some things I did know, but I didn't do, and what I have learned over the years that I can share with you. And so don't miss the class because I'm not going to be here. I think you're going to get some very beneficial things that are going to help you in the next couple of classes. And it'll be a good opportunity for you as a couple to go back and review through the previous lessons, whether you watch them and listen to them or whether you just look through your notes. It's also a good opportunity for you as a couple, if you haven't done all the devotions, to play a little bit of catch up. We'll still have our devotions, but maybe to double up during that time period and to go through that. And then when I come back, we'll continue on into our next lesson, which is talking about intimacy, which is not just a physical relationship. Somebody wants to define intimacy this way: into me see. That's intimacy. Into me see. And so we're going to talk about how to have intimacy in your relationship, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, as well as physically, in going through that lesson. So I hope this has been helpful to you, and I hope you'll start honest, open communication built on trust and confidence. Those are so key. I'd lose my job as a counselor if we could do that. I wouldn't get any phone calls at 2 o'clock in the morning. So let's work on that. All right, let's go ahead and stand.